Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has become the HHS secretary. This is an astonishing development. This means so much, I think, for health, public health, and what might come in regulatory science in the years to come. I just want to start by saying it was a close vote, 52 votes in favor. He lost Mitch McConnell. Trump, I think, is saying that that's not a vote against Kennedy, that's a vote against me. That's what Trump says in an interview. But 52 votes, Republicans put him into that position, and he gained no votes from the Democrat side. Right off the bat, I want to say that's surprising to me, actually, because it speaks to how polarized politics has become. Because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is, spoiler alert, actually a Democrat. I mean, he's somebody who is in the Kennedy family. He is a Democrat. And if you look at his policy positions, historically, they would have been in the Democrat Party. It would have been, perhaps 15 or 20 years ago, a progressive or democratic thing to do to remove dyes and pesticides that are already banned in Europe and Australia and other places. It would have been a Democrat thing to do to sue the companies that make very expensive medical products. That would have been a Democratic position. This has all sort of been put on its head by Donald Trump. He has, I think, to some degree, redefined what the parties mean. And the populist movement in the Republican Party, the fact that Republicans are now the ones critical of the pharmaceutical industry, this is something that didn't exist 10 years ago. And RFK Jr., I think, embodies that. But it's telling to me that people like Fetterman and Sanders and Warren didn't have some common sense and realize that with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at HHS, they might get more of what they actually want, because I don't think they want the pesticides and the dyes in the food either. They might get more of what they would actually want rather than a standard tried and true politician who usually gets the job. I see Chuck Schumer, the Senate minority leader. He was lamenting the fact that RFK Jr., he's not a pharmaceutical executive. He's never run a drug company. How can he be HHS secretary? Chuck, you're speaking to the fact that the system is so rotten. The only people who hold this job are complete and total sellouts who are complicit in the day-to-day tragedy, which is the status quo. So you really need to stop talking, Chuck. And you also need to stop making those undercooked hamburgers. All right. So RFK Jr., he's become the HHS secretary. A while back, someone asked me, you're so tough on Anthony Fauci. Why aren't you equally tough on RFK Jr.? And the answer I gave this person is, Anthony Fauci actually had a leadership position. He actually made decisions from the center of government, and he did some things that were very, very bad. He's at least admitted that he told noble lies. I think that his noble lie narrative is incorrect, and he actually told malicious lies, and those lies were extremely problematic on COVID-19 policy issues. And now increasingly we're learning that he may have been complicit in funding the EcoHealth Alliance grants that funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan that led to the pandemic, and then he covered all that up. So I think there's a lot to be critical of this guy who actually played a role in major events in a government stage and may have killed more people than anyone else in the 21st century. I mean, you have to be critical of that. Okay. But RFK Jr., he's a guy who's always been on the outside of government. He's been a lawyer. He's, to my knowledge, never held any elected office. He's never actually implemented any policies. And so I say that, sure, he may have said some things that I would strongly disagree with, and I fact-checked him twice for publications. He's also said some things that I do agree with and I find provocative and I don't hear anyone else saying. So I'm happy to criticize what he said wrong and what he said right. But the reason I've been a little bit soft on him is that he hasn't had the opportunity to hold an office and actually shape policy like Fauci. But now he does. And so I will judge what he does in that office. This is the most important test. It's not what he said for all these years. It's what is he actually going to do? What is he actually going to do? And let me give some suggestions, okay? You have to go into this and you have to realize, Mr. Kennedy, that you can't win every issue right off the bat. You've got to pick a few issues that are really important, issues where I think you have the public on your side, where you have science on your side, and do something different. I also think, insofar as possible, you need to move decisions into a way in which they will be indisputable, where even your opponents will have to concede to you that you have a point or you had a point. So what does that mean? So one thing I think is low-hanging fruit is obviously food additives and dyes and pesticides that are allowed in the United States that are not allowed in Australia, New Zealand, and the European Union. You can go ahead and ban all of those. And guess what? People will actually like it. Their foods won't be so brightly colored, but I think they'll largely support you. Now, someone said to me, they said that, look, if you get rid of all the dyes from Fruit Loops, it's still going to be unhealthy because it's full of sugars and refined carbohydrates. And I completely agree. You're not solving the health crisis by eliminating these things. However, I recently looked at a bag of bread that was sold at the store, and the list of ingredients was a mile long. I think we truly don't know what would happen if you started to reduce that list of ingredients. We really don't know what would happen to people's health if you really turned bread back into yeast, salt, water, and heat, basic ingredients and flour. If you turned it back to what it's supposed to be, we really don't know. However, I don't think it's going to be the complete story. It may not solve all of human health, and there are other things we need to do. Improve childhood nutrition in school, actually getting people to cook the food in the cafeterias like it once was, rather than having these huge corporate conglomerates sell shitty food to school kids. I think there are other things you're going to need to do, but this is low-hanging fruit. Number 2, the annual COVID-19 vaccine. In this country, the people who ran this policy before, they said that a 6-month-old baby should get an annual COVID-19 booster, and these people added it to the CDC schedule of routine immunizations. Trump has already had an executive order that puts some pressure on universities to remove the COVID-19 vaccine requirement for college students. This is another great place to hit. Here's what you do. 1, that CDC recommendation for all children over 6 months, completely wrong. It has no randomized data to support it. It's completely bogus. It makes no sense in 2025. That needs to be pulled out of there right away. Next thing you need to do, forget about the boosters and vaccine products already on the market. I hear people talk about wanting to remove those from the market. Look, nobody's getting them who doesn't want them right now. What you got to strike is next fall, 2025 fall. Here's what we need to do. Number 1, COVID-19 boosters. They're not going to be available for kids, and they're not going to be available for young people. That makes no sense at all, the risk of that bad outcome in young people. If you're under 50 or under 60, I think there shouldn't even be a booster for you, okay? If you're over 50 or 60, the company can be invited to conduct a randomized controlled trial to show COVID-19 boosters improve clinical endpoints. While they're conducting that trial, perhaps you could provisionally allow the vaccine products to be available for nursing home residents or the few people who actually want them while they're running that trial, but make them run the trial. Here's the key. If the trial is negative, it's going to blow up in their face. And it's going to reveal, I think, the truth, which is that these products, year-over-year boosting, probably has very marginal benefit, if any benefit at all, and has been a waste. If they actually think they can improve outcomes in 18 to 49, go ahead and try to run a randomized trial. Companies, I don't think they'll even do it. They know that that's a bankrupt proposition. They think the probability is very low. That's the next thing you hit. You say, unlike the last administration, we're not giving you unnecessary year-over-year vaccines. And along those lines, read the paper that Mariana Barrosa, John Ioannidis, and I have written on annual vaccines like flu and what we can do there to improve the randomized controlled trial reporting. So that's another place he can strike. Conflict of interest. RFK Jr. should go in right now and take a sledgehammer to the lax conflict of interest policies. If you work in these federal agencies, you can't be on the revolving door, the merry-go-round, where you go into HHS and then you go to pharma and you go back to HHS. Set some clear benchmarks, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year prohibitions, depending on the role, depending on whether or not you're in food or drug products at FDA, depending on what you're doing at HHS, some prohibitions on work in the private sector for the exact same industry you're regulating. I think the public is sick of the swamp. They're sick of the Scott Gottliebs of the world, who was FDA commissioner and then Pfizer board director, and they want some regulation there. CPT codes. The best thing you can do in HHS, the thing that will solve the primary care crisis, that will solve everything, is if you take the reimbursement codes that say a dermatologist seeing people in clinic and taking little shave biopsies should make 2 or 3 times as much money as a primary care doctor or pediatrician working hard in clinic. Those codes determine the fact the derm makes so much more than the pediatrician. And because the derm makes so much more than the pediatrician, all the top students want to be the dermatologist. Okay, that's why the scores are through the roof. They're geniuses. I mean, people going to derm are geniuses. Don't get me wrong, because it's so lucrative per hour. Change the codes. Make the codes reimburse what society benefits from. Primary care, pediatrics, family practice. Turn down the reimbursement on these ultra lucrative niche fields. Okay, turn down the reimbursement. Take those CPT codes away from the AMA, bring them into CMS, revise the codes, make them prioritize societal benefits, and put your earplugs in, because these specialists are going to be crying. They're going to be using their lobbies and cry. You have to ignore that. But if you bend this coding system, and don't even do it drastically, bend it a little bit slowly at first. You bend it a little bit, change the incentives a little bit. Don't let the dermatologist go default on his second house. Change it a little slower. You don't have to cut him off right away. you will change all of healthcare. You will solve the fundamental problem in American medicine, which is that we pay some people way too much and we pay other doctors way too little. You will tackle that. Start with something like that, a small panel of a few things, and then go outward. Vaccine safety. This is the other thing I think you should start with, and I want to mention it. He has been repeatedly saying that vaccines have these adverse safety events, and many of the claims he's made, I think, are not true. However, I think there's a core truth to what he's saying, which is that the current system has no incentive to actually identify all of the adverse events that vaccines cause. There's no mechanism in place. VSD is weak. VAERS weak. These mechanisms that we have created are so weak that in the pandemic, this country did not detect the myocarditis safety signal from mRNA vaccines, nor did we detect the VIT signal from J&J. We first got notice of both of those things from other countries, and then when we started looking, we said, oh, well, actually, first Rochelle Walensky said, oh, I don't see the signal there. Then she said, oh, my God, it's right there. Oh, how did I miss it? Yeah, sure, Rochelle. That's what our country's been doing. Here's what Kennedy can do. Create a new safety surveillance system. I can give you a lot of technical ideas for how to do it really good, but it's got to be active, not passive. It's got to link people at the moment in which they decide to get the vaccine or not, follow them out in the future. Create this system so robust that even your worst critics, if this machine that you've built to detect safety says this vaccine's linked to Bell's palsy, this vaccine is linked to ringing in the ears. If it says that, you want it to be so scientifically accurate that even your worst critics concede, shit, it's linked to Bell's palsy. It's linked to that. They may try to argue that you should give it anyway. They might try to argue that the safety signal is not worth consideration and the benefit is greater. But at least let's be clear on what the safety is. If Kennedy does this, this will be the greatest achievement, I think, in the vaccine science space. Accurate. People say he should release the data that the CDC has. This data, there's a lot of garbage data that exists. You want to do it right prospectively. And I also think the FDA should be building in better randomized control trial endpoints. For example, if I make an RSV vaccine, the primary endpoint of the study can't be lower respiratory tract infections from RSV. It should be all-cause lower respiratory tract infections. Prove to me that by reducing the burden of RSV, you actually make people better off for the clinical entity or construct, not rather the PCR entity or construct. I think there's a big philosophical difference, and I think the FDA set the bar too low. So, Mr. Kennedy, good luck. I will be following you very closely, and now I think it's all that matters. All the rhetoric for 20 years, you're not in power. Now you're in power. You can make a real difference. And pick a few issues. Don't do everything. The government will resist you at all turns. I mean, turning the federal government is like turning a battleship. Doesn't turn on a dime. Turns very, very slowly. They'll resist you. Pick a few things. Do it in a scientifically rigorous way. Bring on good advisors. Make it so that even your opponents will have to eat their hat. And you will have succeeded, I think. That's what I would do to start. And then there's second order and third order things you can do once you get the momentum going. Okay, the next order of business. The CDC, if you're